We are on Wednesday, December 13th at Logan High School in LaCrosse. And we're here to talk about a couple intersections that are near and dear to our hearts. We got Avon and Hager and Liberty and St. Cloud. And the context that we're talking about is an upcoming TCMC passenger rail project that will ultimately introduce an extra rail line and some more trains. Okay. And Aaron Bovey from HNTB.
Yep. So TCMC is going to be the Twin Cities to Twin Cities, Chicago, Milwaukee corridor. So that's the intercity project. One of the projects as part of that intercity passenger rail corridor is here in LaCrosse around the depot. And that is going to be introducing a new second mainline track there. So that's why that's how we've kind of all come together here today and tonight. So with me is Chris. Obviously, he's the WisDOT supervisor leading the study. Joanna Bush from Meeting Hunt also led the alternatives study that's kind of come up with some of these alternatives around that you've seen here in the room. We do have other people here as part of the team. Tom Kratz with WisDOT, he's the TCMC project manager. As we also alluded to, anything that you see from the presentation, from the recording, the board materials, all that's going to be put on the WisDOT website. We have that information here up on this slide. There's a QR code. So if there's anything that you want to go back and look to after this, this public involvement meeting, you're welcome to go there. And there's also a link to a comment sheet. If there's something that comes up afterwards, you can also send your comments in there and we'll be addressing those during the comment period. So just giving you a quick background, a little timeline on how we've gotten here. This all started, as I said, the TCMC went out and did a field diagnostics on all the at-grade crossings along the corridor. And that includes these two in LaCrosse. So we met out in the field, WisDOT, representatives from the railroad, representatives from the FRA. The city of LaCrosse was also present at that. And we went and what a field diagnosis is, we all gathered, looked at the crossings, started talking about the issues and some of the concepts related to how the scope of the TCMC project was going to impact these crossings. From that, WisDOT did take on doing an analysis there that they started this past March. That has been ongoing. And then the technical memo came out in June. And now we're here in December having the public meeting. So looking forward in April, we'll be looking to kind of come to a resolution on what these alternatives may result in, work with all the stakeholders on having a direction forward, and then looking to have that direction be ready for construction when TCMC comes around to actually do the larger overall project to implement some of the improvements. Okay, so what is the TCMC project that we're talking about? The project has been identified to restore the second mainline track from about where the river bridge is all the way through the at-grade crossings near the CPKC yard on the east end. What we're going to do is we're going to install some new track work, put in a new mainline track, restore portions of the platform, actually reconstruct the whole platform adjacent to the tracks. And then we're going to improve the at-grade crossings there at these two intersections. And that is what kind of has caused, or not caused, but that's why we're actually wanting to look at these alternatives based on our field diagnostics. We thought it was very warranted to have a little bit more in-depth of analysis related to all this work that we're planning to do here. So kind of coming back to these at-grade crossings specifically, Chris, I know you're going to talk a little bit about some of the existing conditions and some of the characteristics, but when we were out there, a lot of the folks understood that these two at-grade crossings have some safety concerns. We understand that the rail traffic is blocking these crossings. In talking with CPKC, we recognize some of that. They're also uncontrolled intersections right now. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Chris. Talk a little bit about those existing conditions and characteristics.
One of the biggest important things about these two intersections is, as you know, as local residents, they're neatly sandwiched between a station and a yard. So you've got a lot of train movements. And so that's one of the primary things we are dealing with as we talk about these crossings and the safety issues that we have and the solutions that we are looking to identify. That we're talking about a residential grid, as you know, 25-mile-an-hour streets. As Aaron mentioned, no stop signs right now. Parking is allowed. There are medians. Currently they're in the range of 60 to 100 feet long. That doesn't tend to necessarily deter people from driving around those medians because they recognize, oh geez, if I don't race around that median, I'm going to be waiting here for minutes at a time. So those are some of the things that are in the existing geometry at both of the Avon Hager, Liberty, St. Cloud intersections. What also is there from a railroad safety standpoint is there are lights and gates at each of these crossings. In each approaching direction, there are gates, as you know. The no wayside controls. Down and below here on the slide, you see a little statistics about the traffic. And you can see Avon Hager in Liberty St. Cloud, the numbers there. I won't go through them, but you can see them. And as Aaron said, you can access these reports after the meeting if you wish. First, we're going to talk about a little bit about the things that are happening traffic-wise without talking about trains quite yet, because there's plenty of incidents to talk about just from traffic. So typically what we're looking at is a 5-year look back, 2018 through, actually we added 21 and 22, 2018 through 2022. And you can see each of these crossings has 17 and 9 crashes. If you look on the upper right of this diagram, there's a number called the crash rate, kind of a way that the engineers will look at the data. And typically a number of 2 would cause attention and you can see each of these crossings, 9.28 and a 7.0. That tells us there are some crash concerns. And again, we're not even talking about trains yet. This is just the traffic. And you can see that there were injuries at each of these crossings over the past few years. Now going into the railroad conditions. As you know, there are many activations. So what the analysis that we did, Joanna Bush was the engineer that did this analysis for us. She couldn't make it tonight, as Aaron said, but she worked with the railroad to get some really compelling activation data, meaning she wanted to look at, all right, how often are those lights and gates going off, and how much during the day is that happening? How often are those gates down and closed? And the numbers are pretty compelling. As you can see here, the average is 47 activations a day for Avon Hager, 56 for Liberty St. Cloud. That's just the number of activations when the lights and gates start going down and the gates go down. And when you compile all those activations over the day and the duration that they were active, it's 4.5 hours a day. And that's at Avon Hager, over 5 hours for Liberty St. Cloud. So I think anybody could just look at those numbers and say that's significant, and that might have an effect on the behavior of the traffic, as we said, doing more urgent and or potentially dangerous things, and certainly are in the mind of anybody who lives there saying, oh, there it goes again. So those are certainly, I think, very compelling numbers about the activations. Now, another thing that's really important about the Avon and Hager intersection is that this ranks in I would say our top 20 in railroad crossing safety from the standpoint of multiple crashes over 5 years. We have about that many, about 20 crashes in the state of Wisconsin. Looking at numbers compiled from 2016 through 2020, somebody might want to mute. If they sound like nice dogs, but please mute. The thing about the Avon and Hager intersection is that it has those multiple crashes over the 5 years, and so that again gets on our list of to be concerned from a railroad crossing standpoint. Other things these are located in quiet zones, as you know. So what that means is the train, when it comes through, it doesn't have that added warning feature of honking the loud horn. So that reduces the safety aspect of that horn, but of course it makes it much easier to live next to. But again, in the absence of that horn, we have to think about other things that can help us with the safety. But we want to let you know that we've dug into these different various plans, and what's important is some of these important things that the city and various entities have put into plans regarding these roadways. So they've been recognized as viable existing rail corridors for protecting connectivity. There's Avon Street is a greenway or a slow street. What am I missing there? Safe routes to school plan. Yeah, it's been identified that the pedestrian safety, and I think that was in talking to one of you, that was one key is, hey, let's make sure we're not just talking about vehicles and traffic and semis and cars. We're definitely talking about pedestrians and bikes. Importantly, we talked about that Avon Hagar intersection. Both of those crossings in the past 5 years were pedestrian versus train. One of them was fatal, one was not, roughly in the 2018-19 timeframe. So, but you can see here from these plans that these roadways are recognized as pedestrian heavy. So those are certainly things that we, as we talk about solutions, have to factor in and think about. Okay, so what we'll do next is we'll step into the alternatives that we've identified. And as we talk through this, I want to remind you that these are ideas, these are conceptuals. We're not really advocating any of these particular solutions. We are open to your favorable, your negative comments on these solutions. We're open to different ideas. Another important concept is it could be that any of these ideas on its own isn't solvent, and maybe it might be a combination of two or more of these ideas, such as maybe you throw in a crossing closure at one spot and a 8-quad gate in another. But I just want you to keep those concepts in mind, is we're totally open to your thoughts and ideas on these concepts. One thing that we'll touch on that's kind of broad and global about all of any and all of the options that we would consider is that we'll be focusing, for instance, when we think about pedestrians and bikes, one thing we unilaterally will think about is trying to square up those crossings as much as we can, because we're talking about today, there's how many bike accidents are happening at these crossings that we're not aware of, that are not on our number sheets. It probably happens quite often that people get, whether it's the bumpiness of the crossing or whether it's the angle of the track and the tire snagging it and sending you down. We recognize these crossings have those angles. And so any solutions that we would think about, those are considerations we would put into our ideas. Detectable warning fields, that's a standard. Those are I don't have a picture, but you've seen them, the yellow rectangles at crosswalks that have truncated domes, little circles for people that can't see as well and that can feel their way around. Those are standard, and those are things that we would incorporate into our design. And of course, another idea is pedestrian-oriented warning devices. Perhaps because many warning devices, the flashy lights and the gates are oriented traffic, they're higher up so that the vehicles and truck drivers can see them. So one alternative we can think about is pedestrian-oriented warning devices that are at pedestrian level. I'm 5'6", so a warning device this high would make sense to me as opposed to way up here. So those are just general things that we would factor in any of the solutions that we'd be thinking about. Okay, so here's just a real brief overview of our 8 alternatives, and we'll get into them right now. Alternative 1 is always stop control. Okay, so this is what we're calling our baseline option. As we talked about right now, there are no stop signs. This option would put a stop sign in each quadrant basically, and work together with the existing warning devices. Kind of the benefits and considerations, we think the crashes, that this would be a plus benefit to the vehicle crashes that we see, would not affect traffic, delay times too big. We have to recognize that this option we're considering at our baseline probably not solvent, probably doesn't solve all of our safety issues that we would love to solve as we're introducing a third track and more trains. So we talked about the existing conditions are already having safety problems. Remember, we're having another track and more trains. So that's why we're really passionate about trying to offer some solutions here. The next, what we'll call alternative 2 is this 8-quadrant gate system. This is, so as you can visualize in your head, we've got on the entrance as you're driving up or biking up or walking up to any of these crossings, there's a gate that comes down in the driving lane. What this option would do is add an additional gate opposite that. So meaning to discourage drive-arounds, that dangerous behavior of racing the train and things like that. This would be, I'll go to the next slide. This would be perhaps the most expensive option. The railroad doesn't necessarily like this because they would have to maintain it forever. But it does offer some assurance that it would at least address that particular issue of the people driving around, that would do a good job of preventing those sorts of actions. And it would these things are part of the reason they're very expensive, is there's a lot of technology and engineering into how the timing of those gates and how they're to prevent somebody from getting trapped in the middle of them. So that they're very, very logically sequenced, and that's part of a lot of electronics that go into those systems. There are the medians that we talked about. They're about 60 to 100 feet, but no stop signs as we stand today. Okay, then we'll move on to, and that nicely timed, because now we're going to talk about medians. Alternative 3, or option 3, that we could combine with other alternatives, is to extend those medians. This would have the benefit of, again, discouraging those drive-arounds, those people who are trying to race the train. It would come with a compromise, however. There would be, I think we identified 6 driveways that they would become one right in, right out. So there would be certainly access impacts to some of the local residents with these sort of solutions. So pluses and minuses, and we're very interested to hear your feedback on these ideas, how they might affect you, how they might not affect you. And I think I have another slide on the median. So again, we would anticipate a safer result here, but again, it's those effects to the people that would be compromised. That would be one of our considerations. There are snow plowing considerations, and I think a certain width that the opening that you're talking about would have to be. So yeah, certainly those would be, if we're considering this option, those would definitely be thought about. Great point. Alternative reasons that we might not be able to consider those openings, namely the quiet zones that are there. These are pre-rule quiet zones. So anyway, good point, Matt. That would be another consideration that we'd have to factor in that alternative. Okay, so moving on to alternative 4, these are getting into alternatives that might change the traffic patterns in the local neighborhood. So for one example here, for alternative 4, we would go, Hager Street would go eastbound and St. Cloud Street would go westbound only. That would have advantages of preventing certain movements that would cross with the railroad tracks. So that would minimize our interactions with the traffic and the trains. There are certainly considerations. So I think the safety would increase. Again, considerations and potential ways that this might not be the best is travel times would be impacted. Of course, if you change the directionality of those streets, we're estimating probably a 2-minute impact each and every trip that certain people take in certain directions. So there are, of course, balance points there to doing options like this. Potentially there could be positive impacts of maybe using existing gates in certain locations, things like that. A downside of this is if there happened to be a wrong way driver, this solution would be ill prepared to handle that. So that would be, again, we're talking about pluses and minuses of these solutions. And again, I want to remind you that these things we're thinking about could be paired with some of the other alternatives to create the best solution. St. Cloud is not a throughway to George Street. Yeah, so that would be certainly a consideration to think about in any. Moving on to alternative 5, this would be a similar concept, but thinking about the north-south direction. So Liberty Street would be just northbound, Avon Street could be just southbound. Same sort of considerations, same sorts of pluses and minuses. We think it would be a safety increase, but we think there would be concessions that would be made, again, extra driving times, and perhaps not solving all of the problems that we're looking to solve. But we think it could be an alternative to consider, or part of an alternative to consider. Alternative 6, again, almost combining these two ideas, is making it, we're not just thinking east-west, not just thinking north-south, but combining the east-west and north-south into a more comprehensive one-way, we're calling it a one-way pair network, where of course, I think you can get the idea is traffic, instead of being bi-directional, is going only one way on the street. And so again, very, very similar pluses and minuses to this sort of consideration. Alternative 7, this is the alternative of closing one of the intersections, and we're focusing if our recommendation is if we are thinking about this consideration, we'd probably focus on the Liberty St. Cloud as opposed to Avon Hager due to the lower volumes, I would say. So that would be where we would focus. Notably in this alternative, it would be closed to vehicular traffic, but it would, of course, we always have to be thinking about those pedestrians and bikes. So we would not close it to the pedestrian bikes. We would think about, and you can see, it might show up real little in our diagrams here, but we're kind of showing conceptual ideas of how that could happen and we would, what this drawing does show is a square 90-degree crossing with the railroad tracks to prevent those wheel grabs and things like that for bikers. So that's one notable thing that we'd have to think about with the closure. Again, impacts to traffic, impacts to people that live nearby. They'd have to go a different way. Diversions. No, we're not talking any bridge solutions. No, this is all at grade. Good question. Going into alternative 8, this is kind of interesting. The kind of an emerging technology that we admit is not proven yet, but might be intriguing in situations like this. And what we're talking about is there are various companies that are using the latest technology. They actually use people's cell phone devices and things like that to monitor traffic and to monitor who is where and things like that. But they also can monitor train presence and things like that. So in one particular solution, it could look something like this sign that you see here on the drawing is that in certain situations when the train is about to come, this sign could come up and this might be 2 or 3 or 4 blocks ahead of the crossings. And the idea being that people would then divert. They would be notified, there's a train up there. I'm going to go this, I'm going to take a right here and divert that and go a different safe way. And that's a key to the solution is if we are diverting traffic, we need to think about where is that traffic going and are those crossings safe and able to handle the additional traffic. So those are, and again, thinking about those ideas of combining ideas, this could be something that we might think about implementing in concert with one of the other solutions. So just something for us to think about. We're not in love with it or we don't hate it either, but it could be some solution that could be of effect here and to positive safety.
As we also alluded to, anything that you see from the presentation, from the recording, the board materials, all that's going to be put on the WisDOT website. We have that information here up on this slide. There's a QR code. So if there's anything that you want to go back and look to after this, this public involvement meeting, you're welcome to go there. And there's also a link to a comment sheet. If there's something that comes up afterwards, you can also send your comments in there and we'll be addressing those during the comment period.
So moving on to our next steps, as Aaron indicated, he's right on. What we're striving to do is select alternatives, and we're so happy to see this turnout because I see a lot of passion and I see a lot of people affected by these crossings. So again, please don't be afraid to write down your comments. So we're looking to move forward and select the best options. And very importantly, the options whatever option that we have to go with has to be approved by the Office of Commissioner of Railroads. They are external to us. They are their own agency and they have the power and the authority to approve or disapprove any of these solutions that we propose. And then of course, the ultimate goal is to get it aligned up in concert with the construction of the project in 2026. So with that is the end of our prepared presentation. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you might have.
So, I mean, the track, yeah. So the question was, is there going to be track improvements that are going to be beneficial to pedestrians? Is that a good paraphrase of your question? Okay. So yeah, the track is going to continue to be still, it's standard steel rail with wood ties. However, at the at-grade crossings themselves, we are going to reconstruct those to be more bicycle and pedestrian friendly. So the crossing panels will be replaced. What we can also do is we've seen in the past, we put the rubber flanges in the guideway where the wheel goes in between. Those would be there. So the condition of what you see those at-grade crossings in today is going to be vastly improved at the end of the construction with whatever alternative is selected. Yes.
Um,
They were informed just like everybody else for the meeting. So, you know, CPKC hasn't, if they haven't brought a representative, we can't force them to be here. Yeah. The question is, what is the additional train traffic that's going to be added in the corridor? From a passenger standpoint, it's going to be an additional 4 trains per day. The freight traffic is not anticipated to change or increase as part of our project. So, Chris, I think this one's for you, but if the question is if this project is only highly dependent on the additional track. Yeah. I think I'll help you out just for a second, but I think the answer to the question is mainly that because we're doing the additional TCMC project, these intersections are going to be impacted one way or the other. So it's the right time to address these needs and the safety concerns at these crossings as part of the overall project. The project itself could technically just focus on what it needs to get done, but I think the DOT in this case recognize that this is an opportunity to address other needs that are happening right now.
I would say the answer to that is, I guess, let's tick through the options of what we're talking about is what you didn't see in our 8 alternatives was a bridge. If that were, and that frankly is not part of the budget of the project, and I don't see it being part of this project, frankly, that would impact a lot of people. A lot of you would not be living here anymore, because what that would require is many acquisitions and a lot of real estate, tens of millions of dollars. It's just not, the grade separation is not happening here with this project. It won't happen with this project. Now, to address that though, what one alternative that you did see that was consistent with that is the closures. You know, if that could be a part of a solution that could reduce the interactions there. But you're right, the pedestrians and bikes still would be able to access. But the idea is we'd have something designed and built for them to cross safer than it is today.
I just want to tack on one extra thing with that too, is that with the TCMC project, with some of the other track improvements that we are implementing here, the fluidity of the rail traffic is to get better. So we would hope that, and because we don't know this for sure, just based on how the operations will ultimately end up happening, is that with these improvements that we had, the closure of how both gates come down at the same time and how far that train needs to come out of that yard, we're hoping that this alleviates some of that concern as well as part of the overall global project. So the question is have we already started considering some of those crossing angles for the pedestrians at these everything that you've seen today has just been primarily a concept for the SKU. I think what Chris has alluded to, some of the global design considerations that the project's ultimately going to deal with, is looking at exactly that. How best can we, when we get into something that really needs to be constructed, how best can we make those angles appropriate for bicyclists, pedestrians? And if we can't, what are other safety measures that we can do to help them with those types of things? Because the crossing surface is going to get longer, right? I think we've both been out there. We see that the crossing surface isn't quite as wide as probably what the users are using with the hard new concrete surface. That is one of those elements that we are going to take care of as part of our overall project.
And I'll remind you of this slide that I think I talked about this earlier, is that in every one of the solutions that we are considering, we are considering detectable warning fields. We are considering aligning up those crossings to be as perpendicular as possible. So you might not have seen the images in every alternative, but those are considerations in every one of these alternatives.
Jenna's got an online question. We're going to take that one real quick.
Yes, if the streets are made one way, would it just be near the track or the full length of the street?
In those alternatives, I think the effects would extend out a few city blocks in each direction. Let's see if I can pull up one of the
Yeah, I believe it was 3.
3 city blocks in each direction,
Yeah,
roughly.
it says approximately 3 to 5 blocks in the one-way pairs. So that for alternatives 4, 5, and 6, which, right, alternative 5 is the north-south pair. Alternative 6 is the combination of both. I think that the approximately 3 to 5 blocks of one way applies to all 3 of those. Yes, sir, up front.
There's 3 major roads that are used in this area, Copeland, Rose, and George. During rush hour, Avon and Liberty are both alternatives for emergency response vehicles. So if you're going to be doing anything here, hopefully you would speak with emergency response people in the city. Because if you turn any of these into one-way streets, that's gonna totally adjust their time for service or the route they take.
And to that comment, I think that's why the city of LaCrosse is a stakeholder in this, and that's why they're being coordinated along with this whole process. City of LaCrosse's representatives are here this evening.
Just to repeat the comment for those of you who didn't hear, the first comment was regarding the trains, the CPKC, the rail operator and the switching movements, and what control do we have, or what responsibility should the railroad have to do a better job of not blocking those crossings? I don't know if I have a great answer for that in any crossing in the state of Wisconsin, to be honest. There are state statutes. They oftentimes they don't get litigated because ultimately the train companies, the rail companies prevail. I know that's not welcome news, but that's part of the reason why we didn't focus on those alternatives, is we don't have much control over that. Not to say that we'll ignore it. I think it's a great point and something to consider. Could the train operations change? Aaron and I and the project team don't have much control over that. I don't know how else to confront that. And then the secondary question there had to do with the city of LaCrosse, and is it Avon Street being a greenway? I don't know. Did you want to respond to that? No. Okay.
A single lane in each way or lanes in each way? Because my thought is anytime you turn a street to a one-way, it's a racetrack at that point. Because if you're gonna increase the speed, you're gonna increase the accidents. So, especially if you put two lanes.
Yeah.
One direction.
So I think the just to repeat the question for those online is what is the consideration of how these one-way pairs look from their existing today? Is it going to remain is it going to go to a one lane or stay as a 2-lane type street?
I don't know the answer to that. I think if we pursued these options, those would be some of the things we'd have to think about. Is it near? Would the road narrow to 1 lane in that direction, or would it be 2? I don't think we have today. I don't think we have we haven't gone far enough into any of those, but great consideration. Agreed.
Yeah.
And the comment being the city will have a very big part of these decisions. Absolutely. Excellent. Thank you, Brian. The comment there in response to the question about who to contact for block crossings, to take on to the thought of the Federal Railroad Administration. That is a primary way to go. Is the FRA has a portal where you can report blocked crossings. Now, what they do with that information is a different story. As the commenter just said, the FRA compiles that data so that they're smarter about it. When it goes into actions, I'm not sure what actions come out of that. I won't speak to that.
Sir, did you have a still question up front?
Yes. Do you know what the number is for that to call?
Uh,
Nobody knows the number to call when you want to call
We'll
After the meeting, I have one.
yep, we'll get that, and then maybe we can just find a way to put that with our documents. Okay. Sir, did you have one?
On alternative 2, where you adding the extra gates on the other side.
Yeah.
Along with the stop signs, which I think the stop signs are a good idea regardless of whatever you do, just to get people from, like they said, they'll barrel through no matter what. So if we had stop signs, that might deter, but people are still gonna be stupid regardless of what you do. But on the alternative 2 with extra gates, because I live on a block where we're affected by the medians.
Mhm.
The reason when we had this meeting years ago, they talked about, they gave us options to keep it a no train horn area, which is railroad considers a loose idea or suggested, is that we could either do the median, which was the cheaper option to keep it no train horn, or they could put in the extra gates, was more expensive. Well, they went with the medians. If we go with alternative 2, which I think is the best option, can we have those medians removed because they don't deter nobody? like people still go around them, even if you extend them, and it just messes with people's ability to get into their driveways and stuff. So if you add this extra gates, can those medians be removed? It's just gonna alleviate a lot of hassle for snow plows trying to get through, emergency vehicles, just in general.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would throw that as a consideration for alternative too.
So the question or the comment is part of alternative two, can the medians be eliminated if the quad gate system is implemented at both crossings? So I think it's definitely something that can be looked at and considered. I know it's not showing up here on as part of this alternative of eliminating the medians. It would really come circling back to the quiet zone requirements for these at grade.
It's not a quiet.
But
Yeah.
when they were doing this
Yep.
before, when they put the medians in, that was part of keeping it quiet.
Sure.
One of the options was no median, just add extra gates. So I feel like that should still be on the table for a no quiet zone.
Okay, all right, we'll just make a note of that. I know it wasn't shown in any of our alternatives, but definitely something that can be considered in the final design.
And just to replicate what the city of LaCrosse just said is they're informed that if we would go with the 8 quad gate system, that they've been assured that the medians could be removed in that alternative. Great question.
What's the number?
No number, you could leave a comment here, by paper if that's your preferred method. Otherwise, if you go to the website, you can get everything there as well. Sir, did you have still a question up front?
Yes.
Do you know what the number is for that to call?
Uh,
Nobody knows the number to call when we want to call
Somebody might want to mute. If they sound like nice dogs, but please mute.
And we'll leave this up on the screen. Mike, is there a board with this one too, or
It's on here.
the QR is right there?
No, not
Oh, the
on.
website is, yeah.
It's on.
Yeah.
So you could take an extra comment form home for it with you. That would have the address for you.
Okay, is there any final questions? Got one last one up front here?
One comment about the alternative 8. I know Jerry mentioned that he thought it would be good to have those up there, the warning signs, a couple blocks ahead. I live right on Avon Street, just south of the Avon Hagar intersection. And if those lights start going, people don't take an alternate route, they floor it. If you put one of those things 2-3 blocks ahead, all they're gonna do is floor it in the neighborhood in order to get through. They're not gonna take an alternate route.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight.
Thank you very
I mean,
much.
the team will be around here, lingering around the board. So if you have other questions, happy to answer more and have more conversations. Thank you for everybody online. This is going to conclude the presentation this evening.